the fake news. It's fake.
Donald Trump, who made the phrase fake news famous. And for once, he would have been correct if he'd been referring to the Vikings in Ireland, which is one of the earliest examples of real fake news. Why is that? Because the only people who could write books that recorded the history are the very ones that were being targeted by these marauding raiders looking for the church's riches.
Save us, Lord, from the wild Northmen who lay waste our country. They strangle the crowd of old men and of youth and of virgin boys. Repel from us all evil.
The people writing the history were fearful of the Vikings. They had a vested interest in presenting them as, bloodthirsty savages. They were violent and aggressive, and they did launch lightning raids around the coast of Ireland and Britain and beyond. Nobody had quite seen the like of it before.
But the monks and the monasteries were no strangers to violence. The world of the 800s was a time of constant fighting, with local chieftains and monasteries all raiding each other and killing and stealing for power and control.
Well, we know that the guy two provinces over is going to come, and we've heard rumours of him amassing his army, or we know that there's a bit of an argy-bargy between us and them. It's a bit more visible and it's a little bit less terrifying. Well, the consequence might be the same at the end. The fear factor is different.
So this new group were distinguished more by being foreign, good fighters, and pagan. They targeted river mouths with their ships as they provided shelter, but also with access to the interior of Ireland. And Arklow was a perfect site.
And it started off as just a landing place. It was a summer camp where they could go up into the hinterland, into places like Glendalough, down to Ferns at the monastery down there. This was a perfect base to hit places like Clonmore, like Ferns, and especially like Glendalough, which they did in 836 and again in 837.
There's no standing armies at that time. There's no garrison of people sitting around waiting for trouble to erupt. There's no police force or anything of that nature. So if something happens, you need to get your people together first of all, figure out what's going on, figure out where the threat is coming from, and how are you going to address that. And then, because we know in Ireland there's no kind of nucleated settlement, there's no towns. So by the time you kind of get the whip around going and get everybody together, the Vikings or whoever could be raiding could have been and gone already.
In these times, it was bad weather that monks prayed for.
The wind is fierce tonight. It tosses the sea's white hair. I fear no wild Viking sailing the quiet main.
Donald O'Crown, the late professor in UCC, he, going through the annals, he identified, I think it was 117 different raids on monasteries, 17 of which were attributed to the Vikings, which means 100 weren't. To get over the channels, the narrow channels, they had to find a deep pool they could use as a harbour, just about half a mile up river. And that pool is called Pound of Collie locally. Now, Pound of Collie means nothing in Irish, English, or Norse. It's a corruption of the Irish Paulachala. Now, Paulachala means actually harbour pool. But adjacent to that spot is a high bluff, great place to put a stronghold, immediately overlooking your harbour pool where you can protect your ships and so on. And from that, the Normans came down in the 12th century and built on that, they developed it, but they only developed what the Vikings had already put in place. In 1962, over in Roskilde in Denmark, in mud flats at Roskilde, they came across the remains of 6 11th century Viking longships. Now, it's been known for a long time that you can date wood by tree rings and other tests. But it's become so sophisticated now that the chemical composition of a piece of timber is a fingerprint. And you can actually say roughly where the tree was likely to have grown. Now, in one of those 6 wrecks that were recovered, showed that the timbers are actually felled in the Wicklow, Glendalough area. If those timbers were felled in Glendalough, the timbers would have been floated down this river, because this is the river that flows through Glendalough and comes out at the sea here. If there was this, and we know there was an established Viking settlement, they would have had the skills to build the boats here. And we got in touch with Denmark, with the Roskilde Museum, and we put the argument to this, that this is Arklow built. And they've agreed, and they've actually changed a lot of the signs.
They're most famous in an Irish context for bringing the town to Ireland, urbanisation. And we know it was almost certainly happening as well in Wicklow and Arklow at the time. So the Vikings come into that picture and they start aligning themselves with certain kings against other kings. They become, in some cases, mercenaries. They have a stake, they have skin in the game, basically at that stage. You know, our history books tell us that Brian Boru came along, united all the Irish and forced the Vikings out of the country. It's not the case. Brian Boru came up to Dublin with an army that included Limerick Vikings, and the people he was fighting against in Dublin were a mixture of all sorts of people, including the Dublin Vikings, to whom he was related to in some way.
So more cases of fake news in the story of the Vikings. But then there's the question of their legacy. What did the Vikings do for Arklow?
Arklow it's kind of been corrupted over the years to Arklow. It was originally Arklow Law, and Arklow was a Viking personal name. Law refers to the marshy area just west of the bridge, so this was Arklow Law, or Arklow Swamp if you want, but that's where the town came out of. What a lot of people don't realise, it was the Vikings in Ireland that introduced Ireland to coinage, to weights and measures. They had a wonderful international system. They had their own empire that went from the Volga right across to America and Greenland.
Their legacy is also to be found in the English language, with hundreds of words such as husband, dirt, law, thrift, loan, sale and saga. There's even a little bit of Viking on every computer and phone today. This symbol is well recognised and is actually a combination of 2 Norse runes that make up the name of one of the most successful Viking kings, Harald Bluetooth. The Irish nationalism of the 19th century built a romantic image of the proud, savage Viking warrior of our ancestry, and those images that once created panic and fear became a symbol used extensively in selling goods and even in children's playgrounds.
Assumptions about archaeological sites in Ireland in the antiquarian period, where you could have ring forts, which would be from Gaelic Ireland, that would be called Dane Mount, or you could have the modern Bailey castles from the Norman period that would be associated with the Danes or the Norse, and they'd be assumed to have been thrown up by the heathens. And so there's a lot of misinformation at that point in time.
But the true story of the Vikings should really be revered for what they truly were. Okay, good fighters, but also world traders and society builders. Arklow owes its very existence to them. But it is the fake news romantic image that survives most strongly in the world of advertising and playgrounds.